I am so excited to be here today with Katie McGinty. Katie is Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer for Johnson Controls, which is one of the 100 most sustainable companies, and also has an incredible background in history and sustainability and environmental activities, and what a wealth of knowledge. So excited to have this conversation, Katie.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
It's truly our pleasure. So last quarter, we had a discussion with the CEO of an energy supply company, with an electric utility, talking about the supply side of decarbonization and the clean energy transition. And the supply side is certainly an important part of the formula, but so is the demand side. And Johnson Controls is so involved in helping your customers and clients manage the demand side of energy use. And what you all do is help building owners and property owners be more efficient, in part through building automation. And just as context, the built environment is about 40% of carbon emissions in the world. About 2/3 of that is from the operations of the building, and another third is from the construction of the building. And you all are involved in reducing the carbon output of those operations. And kind of my first question is, how does a 140-year-old Midwestern industrial company lean in so hard to sustainability very early in these discussions, really?
So 140 years young company. And it is true, there's a dynamism inside of Johnson Controls where every day it is about that innovation that moves the needle on sustainability, and increasingly the coherence of sustainability without performance on the business side. Mm-hmm. You know, to roll back the tape a little on some of the major pieces you mentioned, just to hit some of them. So that 40% number, so it's a big slice of the greenhouse gas equation, right? So most people think climate change, solar, wind, electric vehicles, but it is clear that there's no decarbonizing the climate without decarbonizing buildings.
Right.
Now that also gets to your technology insight about OpenBlue. So the challenge is 40% that needs to be cut. The good news is we have the technology today to drive that 40% pretty darn close to zero, net zero. And it's a trifecta. So it's about efficiency. You know, you rip out the old HVAC and you're immediately realizing maybe a 30% cut, 3 to 5 year payback. All right, that's good. It's not net zero. So efficiency is key, but then it's about electrification and digitalization. At electrification, you pull out any on-prem need for space heating, water heating from fossil fuels. You're getting another big chunk of decarbonization, and you're driving your savings even bigger. But the real revolution coming to buildings is the OpenBlue piece. It's about data and digital. You know, thank God we have a lot of the COVID nasty impact behind us, but the numbers at the height of the shutdown were really revealing. So, you know, 80% reduction in occupancy, but only a 20% reduction in electricity use. And that's because, as you know, buildings are one giant on-off switch.
Right.
They're totally analog. You turn them off, bad things happen. But that shows you the treasure trove of savings and functionality that we can achieve when we go from analog to digital, and incredible spectrum of optionality with a building that goes from just a weight on the balance sheet to a real agile, flexible, strategic asset.
So I really focus on something you said, which was the 3 to 5 year payback on these investments. I'm going to imagine a lot of CFOs out there like that sound, right? That's a pretty good payback. What's the experience that you all are having with your customers? Is it a hard sell to get them to pursue these technologies? Is it just a life cycle issue that at the right time they'll retrofit their building, they'll make the investments on the front end during construction? What does the market tell you all about the demand for those services?
Yeah, so two things. So first of all, the 3 to 5 year payback is actually with the conventional technology. When you go to electrification and heat pumps, where you're also realizing that savings in on-prem fossil, you're at 1 to 3 years. But again, the real prize is digital. I'll give you an example. So a very sophisticated major player in the IT tech space come in and we look at their data centers to optimize their data centers. No visibility without digital to the fact that they had a series of 10 chillers. They were working them all in conjunction with each other. So what did you do? One, none of them was working at peak performance where our economizer would kick in. So they were all operating below there. They were all accumulating service hours so that they would have to be replaced sooner. With digital, you get visibility to that, and literally the interventions paid for themselves day one. And I think this is important. It's just one example, but it goes to the transformation of sustainability from something that is business peripheral to business critical. And so to your point, year over year, even month over month or day over day, we see a hockey stick of our customers saying, look, we're coming to you because you're number one in your industrial space from a sustainability point of view. We want to buy your chiller. We don't want to buy your carbon. You keep your carbon. We don't want our scopes 1 and 2 increased because we're buying your scope 3 and buying your chiller. So it's imperative to be able to tell that customer, I'm not just selling you something, I'm your partner. So you're going to meet and exceed your own climate and bottom line commitments.
And I know your customers have more and more aggressive commitments, or at least are getting more aggressive in the strategies to meet their commitments. Do you see any sort of regionalization of this? Is it pretty established in Europe, picking up steam in the U.S.? Maybe Asia has a different trajectory. I'm sure it's a global phenomenon, but do you see differences across the globe?
Well, yes. However, the forward momentum is more the story.
Right.
And whether it's in North America, Europe, or Asia Pacific. And here's the other thing that's interesting is it's not just the customer facing, the John Q facing brands that want to be able to tell a nice story. We've got industrial America coming back. And I will tell you, as we partner with those companies, chip fabs, data centers, electric vehicle supply chain, they are looking for those facilities to be net zero from day one. And so this is becoming just a part of the business imperative, the way that companies are going to cut waste and build their bottom line, the way they are going to attract and retain the best talent, and the way they increasingly are going to align themselves with the expectations of their shareholders. Shareholders who are saying, I want these assets to be future-proofed.
Right.
Here today, stronger tomorrow.
Yeah, and we're really seeing that dramatically. The Electric Power Research Institute recently did a study of all of the announced new manufacturing facilities in the U.S. There were over 155 new facilities. And as you talked about, chip fab foundries, but there's critical mineral processing, there's battery manufacturing, there's EV manufacturing, recycling and circularity type plays, and it's all over the country. It's literally in every region of the country. And I think we, at least EPRI, sees a tremendous boon in reshoring and onshoring that's driving just a renaissance of industrial construction in the U.S.
One of the things that's so interesting about this conversation, neither of us has mentioned yet once government regulation, making you do it. It's such a transformation of how to think about this whole arena. You know, we've heard some back and forth on ESG, but some recent stats to me really tell the tale. So statistics that show, for example, that for investment advisors, year on year, 81% say that they're caring more about climate as they think about the investment advice they're giving, or investors themselves, something like 70%. And, you know, it's not hard to see why. I mean, Mother Nature's been shaking her fist something fierce of late. Insurers are certainly noticing that. But I think the opposite is true too, that whether it's investors or customers and people who keep an eye on who's winning and what's winning in markets, this is a strategic advantage because it unleashes creativity, innovation, and a cut above for the companies that are smart about sustainability as part of their strategic plan.
Yeah, and I mean, you've summed it up so beautifully that this isn't a philanthropic or a policy-driven revolution or evolution. It's economics driving it. It's investors driving it. It's customers, employees, and I think it is going to be it is going to have legs. It's going to continue.
Now, I will say that it is the case, too, that the SEC is coming to ESG. And so the kind of expertise that we've been very grateful for with PwC in terms of, you do have to get real as rain now, right? In terms of preparing yourself for that reporting. And some of that is it's a Herculean effort. It's shoulder to the wheel. It's just like when Sarbanes-Oxley came in after the 2008 financial situation. So get those processes in place, make sure it's enterprise-wide, make sure that there is a seamless partnership between finance, sustainability, and business operations. But, I try to share with colleagues, brace for it, but embrace it as well. As we've gotten into this and it's pulled more and more of every part of JCI to the table, not only has it meant that we have changed up our line card with this most expansive set of these heat pumps that deliver 3 times the energy workable that you put in the front end, but it enabled us, talking with our finance partners, to say, customers are saying, we don't necessarily have the capital right now to do the upfront financing. So that led to innovation where we're now offering sustainability as a service, net zero as a service, and leveraging the savings to be realized to take away that upfront capital cost concern.
Right, because it's your core competency, not your customer's core competency. They just want things to work and to be as efficient as possible, and leave it to you to figure out how to do it and use your balance sheet to help finance that. So that makes perfect sense. So you mentioned reporting, which is near and dear to the hearts of our listeners who are primarily finance function. And you very eloquently said the importance of that reporting, given the importance of this stuff to your strategy. And how's it going? What have you learned from it?
Well, I do think it's well for colleagues and companies to be remembering that Sarbanes-Oxley experience and the reinvention of how you think of the chain of command with respect to data. It's probably still the rule and not the exception that the sustainability team in a company is pretty small, not necessarily fully integrated into the business, but that has to change. And so we have stood up a center of excellence. I love the fact that actually it's our finance department now that owns that, but we have clear delineation and ownership of that data collection, data stewardship, data reporting, data quality. The other thing that we've done, and coming back to digital, what I think our friends out there will find is it becomes impossible to do this manually. Grabbing literally receipts from water bills and electric bills and all of that, and trying manually to interpret them in 15 different languages from 30 different countries around the world where your operations are. Our platform's called OpenBlue Net Zero Advisor that enables an automatic ingestion of all of that utility data and translation of it across languages to consistent language and consistent units of measure, and then gives you that scorecard against your scope 1 and 2 commitments. And so that architecture is vital. But I think as companies are thinking about this, think about that partnership between the finance team, the sustainability team, and ensure there's enterprise-wide visibility to the ownership and responsibility for those data sets.
Well, I think that your comments are going to be an aspirational goal for many of our listeners, and you've gone about it exactly the right way. It's got to be technology enabled. It's got to be well controlled. And, maybe it's at the level of Sarbanes-Oxley. Maybe it's slightly less, but it's well controlled. And how you define that is going to matter on your jurisdiction and whether you have assurance provisions and the complications of this is just going to grow with different reporting regimes in different parts of the world. The EU versus, CSRD versus SEC versus California.
Yes,
it's just growing in complexity.
And each one of them is growing the universe of what needs to be reported and who needs to report in various kinds of dimensions. So you've got the U.S. publicly traded only. You've got Europe, anyone doing business in meaningful fashion, plus U.S. SEC, you've got just climate. CSRD, you've got the variety of climate, nature, water. The other thing that is coming to the fore here and changing is for maybe next chapter in California, but in Europe, it's not just about reporting. You have to show your carbon transition plan. Right. And it's got to be a credible plan. You've got to show it's overseen by your board of directors, and you've got to show that it's financed to achieve that emission reduction trajectory. Now, having said that stuff that sounds so weighty, it literally is the case that as buildings, for example, are 40% of that load, the flip side of it being such a big part of the emissions picture is there is tons of waste there, and most of the interventions cash flow. Right. So if your balance sheet is tight, run towards decarbonization as something to unlock trapped capital.
There's an excellent ROI on these expenditures,
exactly.
both societally and in your financial statements. Yeah. Well, Katie, I could go on in this conversation for a long time, but I think we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been fun.